Congressman, you've been very critical of GOP leadership in the past. What do you think about the GOP leaders of today in the House and in the Senate?
Well, I think they've lost their way. I think the Republican Party has lost their way because they talk conservative. They talk about freedom and individual liberty, and they talk about a strong foreign policy. Bush talked about a humble foreign policy and no nation building and no policing the world. So I would say we've been misled and that we need to change our direction. So the leadership who have been overtaken by the neoconservatives in pretending to appeal to our base have been misleading, so many people. And I think that's why we're losing. I think that's why we lost last fall. The people are sick and tired of it. They know the debt is going up, that there's no pretense to protect our personal liberties. Our personal liberties have been severely attacked since 9/11, and our First and Fourth Amendment especially have been eroded with things like the Patriot Act and warrantless searches. And I just think that most people realize that we're moving away from those principles the Republicans talked about. But that doesn't mean that I'm not talking about traditional Republican principles, because I believe we should practice what we preach. And we have in the past been very good, Republicans at least much better, on foreign policy. Certainly it was the responsibility of Eisenhower and Nixon. It was intended to clean up the mess that the other party created, by getting involved in a no-win war in Korea and a no-win war in Vietnam. And here it's switched over. Now the Democrats are elected to clean up our mess that we created in the Middle East. So it seems like it's not so much that I'm strange to the Republican Party. Only currently it is, but my Republican traditions, I can defend all that I say, that Republicans at least pretended to believe in what I'm talking about.
Would you have voted for the immigration bill that the Senate voted on?
No, I don't. No, I didn't read it, but just from cursory knowledge of it, no, I wouldn't, because of the reward for breaking the law, and I think we need a different immigration policy. But I would not reward people who cut in front of the line, so I couldn't have voted for that. And I doubt if it'll come to the House.
Congressman, your campaign literature highlights the fact that you have never voted to increase executive power. And I'm wondering, during the Bush administration, there's been a very concerted effort to what they view as reasserting powers that were lost, particularly during the post-Watergate era. Things like their invocation of executive privilege, the signing statements, as you mentioned, domestic wiretapping without a warrant.
Right.
Where do you think this administration has gone too far?
Do I think they have gone too far? Absolutely, way too far. And they've undermined the basic principles of our Bill of Rights, and I think it's a sad story. But a lot of Republicans understand this, but they have been sort of too quiet because they don't want to be disloyal to the party or machinery. But that's starting to change now, whether it's the war or on some of these other issues. It was the post-11 atmosphere that was so detrimental to us, because when the Patriot Act came up, the implication was, Ron, how can you vote against the Patriot Act? You're not very patriotic. That was the inference. At the same time, I said, well, have you read it? No, we don't need to read it. The people want something done. And it wasn't even available to be read. So it's that atmosphere that I resent, So, yes, we've gone way, way too far. These signing statements, executive orders, this whole idea that, this interpretation of commander-in-chief. Yes, he has the right and the authority to command the troops, but he doesn't become commander-in-chief of our personal lives, and gives him this authority to spy on all Americans without search warrants. And get rid of habeas corpus. I'm astounded that more people aren't upset, even though there are a lot of people being upset about this undermining of our personal liberties and personal privacy.
Congressman Paul, since you're from Texas and have interest in border issues, do you think the U.S. government should be helping the Mexican president with his war against the drug cartel?
Helping the Mexican government do what?
Fight the drug cartels.
Fight the drug cartels? Not the Mexican government, no. We don't have authority to do anything with the Mexican government. We have authority to protect our borders, but I don't have an authority. Where would I get the authority in the Constitution to tax you to go down there and tell the Mexican government what to do? I mean, I just don't have that authority. Besides, it wouldn't work. So it's not practical and it's not proper. So, no, I wouldn't be for that, but I'm for having more border guards. You know.
Do you think that would slow the flow of drugs across the border?
Well, I'm not, my position on the drug war is the drug wars have been no more successful than the war in Iraq. So I think that whole thing should be changed. The prohibition of drugs is, the results of that has been equal to the prohibition of alcohol. And it's a total disaster. At least in prohibition of alcohol, they had enough respect for the Constitution. They amended the Constitution. Today, there's no respect whatsoever. You just prohibit whatever people want to prohibit. So, no, I would de-emphasize that. But I suspect that much of the violence on the border is related to this drug war, which benefits, the drug dealers. So, I mean, who benefited from prohibition of alcohol? The gangsters. Turn it over. I see addiction from a medical viewpoint. It's a disease, and we've criminalized it and made it so that if you have an addiction, you're automatically a criminal, and it drives them into the underground. You have to rob and kill and go to prostitution to pay for drugs that don't cost anything anyway. And if I help a patient by saying, you're not ready to quit? No, I'm not ready to quit. Well, let me give you some drugs. Maybe next week you'll be ready. And when you're ready, come talk to me. I go to jail. And then what do? We have states that pass laws that allow people to use marijuana for medicinal purposes. And the federal government comes in and overrules the states. Some people understand this. They don't understand states' rights on other issues, but they understand the state rights issues. Why should the federal government come in here and say, you can't even use marijuana and you're dying? And then who wants to prohibit it? Compassionate conservatives. I mean, the whole thing. So I think that border violence comes from a drug war that is ill-advised.
I'm wondering, Congressman, does your view of a limited role of government also apply to social issues like choice on abortion or on same-sex marriage?
On personal associations, all of them, they're legal. But neither can they be prohibited, nor can those who have personal relationships use their relationships to force them on me or on the taxpayer, which means that same-sex marriage, you can do whatever they want as long as they're not hurting people, voluntary consent. But when it comes to abortion, the issue isn't so much of freedom of choice. The issue is whether there's a life involved. If there's a life involved, you have to protect the life of all individuals. And that becomes more difficult and more complicated. The more difficult and more complicated the issue, the more local it should be. So I want to denationalize it. I don't think the courts should rule on it. I don't think the federal government should rule on it. They shouldn't take, if you're for abortion, she's not, I'm not allowed to take your money and, if you're against it and allow abortions to occur, that's just so offensive. So, and I, as a physician and one who tries to understand the legal status of a fetus, it's very legal. It's alive, it's human, has legal rights, it has inheritance rights. If you accidentally injure the fetus, you're liable. If somebody in a violent act kills it, you're taken to court for a violent act, even murder in some states. So we can't ignore that. So it's not just simply a privacy issue, because if it were strictly a privacy issue, our homes are our castles and should be absolutely private. If you say it's only a privacy issue, you've actually legalized infanticide, because the baby's born in the crib. But this thing has become such a difficult issue for so many, because now I can get paid for doing the abortion on a 3 or 4 or 5 pound infant and get paid for it, but the baby's born, the girl throws it away, we arrest her. What's the difference between the value of that life 1 minute before birth and 1 minute after birth? And I think legally we have to resolve that. And there will be times, first, I don't want the federal government involved, and there are certainly times in very, very early pregnancy where the definition of pregnancy is undefinable. Even though I'm strong right to life, I recognize that, you can't define it medically or legally. How can you make a crime out of it? So let's say the day after pill and things, that's getting overly burdened with details that confuse the issues more. And I'm sure the people who think abortion is wonderful and perfect as an absolute right don't think about, seeing a 5-pound baby extracted and allowed to die.